Have you ever felt invisible? The useless protagonist of this story feels that way every day. The target of jokes, the punching bag of the school, the boy that no one notices until something changes. Amidst screams, humiliations, and a desperate desire to be someone, a mysterious window appears before him. The famous mission window. And suddenly, life stops being ordinary and turns into a living, cruel, and unpredictable webtoon. Now, every choice is a mission. Every punch is a chance to evolve. Our boy goes from a failure to a leader. Johnson will discover that, in the world of missions, fear is just the first obstacle, and the next level may cost much more than he imagines. Today's wonder is the mission supremacy. The protagonist is a failure who suffers bullying from his peers. They watch a work where the character is also bullied and mock it. They complain that the hero gains powers out of nowhere, not knowing that this will repeat. After attacking him, they leave Johnson on the ground, feeling useless. He imagines that his life were a webtoon with missions and powers. Suddenly, he discovers that he really lives in one. Intrigued, he shouts, "Mission window," repeatedly. Surprisingly, a window appears before him. The next day, in class, he observes the system. When trying to click yes, he misses and touches a girl's stomach. She accuses him of harassment and slaps him. Then, the girl blackmails him saying she has 20,000 followers. Thanking our MC, he buys food for her. On the way, the protagonist is attacked again by the bullies. Even trying to react, he backs down in fear. At home, the boy argues with his mother and says he will be a YouTuber. His sister mocks him and Johnson isolates himself. Remembering the window, he accepts the mission. The system instructs him to apologize to his mother. He runs and does it, still shouting, completely surprising her. Johnson's sister thinks he has gone crazy, as he had never apologized to their mother. But he completes the mission and earns a gold card. When he says, "Reveal card," the message appears, "Consumable card, grow 3 centimeters." He grows from 1.68 to 1.71 and celebrates, even knowing it was just the tutorial mission. His mother, surprised, also apologizes and calls him to eat, marking a change in their relationship. The next day, Johnson goes to school beaming. The girls notice that he has grown and compliment him. Meanwhile, the system creates a new mission. The reward will be a gold card and a silver one. Distracted, he bumps into Beck Charon, the girl who had blackmailed him. The new mission was simply to kiss Beck Charon. Desperate, Johnson thinks about giving up, but the system threatens him with losing all rewards and the mission window. He needs to complete the task before the end of class. Terrified, he starts repeating, "Kiss, kiss," out loud, becoming a joke in the classroom. His friend Yakuza teases him, and they argue about how to get a kiss. In the end, Johnson realizes he can only succeed if he is alone with the girl. During gym class, Beck Charon decides to stay in the room. She notices Johnson watching her and jokes with him. Beck asks for a juice, but the boy had already brought one. He, nervous, tries to muster the courage to kiss her. Johnson asks if she has ever kissed anyone, acting awkwardly. The classmates film the scene, and the boy is attacked. Surprisingly, Bayek intervenes and tells the attacker to stop. Even so, Johnson leaves embarrassed and devastated. At home, he laments his failure with no card, no kiss, and no dignity. But the system considers the indirect kiss from the juice as a completed mission. Johnson receives a gold card and a silver one. When revealing the gold card, it restores his vision to 2.0, leaving him amazed. The happiness is immense, as he could barely see before. Soon he decides to check the content of the silver card. The protagonist is shocked again, finding it too powerful for his level. The mystery of the power of this new card is left for the end. Johnson begins to realize that the system can completely change his life. Then our protagonist runs to tell that he can see well again, but only finds his sister, who mocks him and tells him not to talk to her at school. Even with the improvement, the bullying continues. The chubby kid attacks him right in the classroom, and no one helps. Johnson tries to dodge, but the attacker forces him to kneel and even makes him smoke. At that moment, his sister appears and interrupts the scene. To protect her and avoid more trouble, Johnson lies, saying the attacker is his friend. The chubby kid then pretends camaraderie and later asks to be introduced to the boy's sister, making offensive comments. In the bathroom, Yakuza witnesses everything and ends up getting beaten too. Tired of the humiliation, Johnson calls him a failure. The attacker lunges at him, but the protagonist unexpectedly lands a clean punch to his face. The strength comes from the silver card, which is an F-level boxing attack card. The system activates a new mission, defeat Choi Chang-dong. The reward will be a gold card and a bronze one. Determined, Johnson faces the bully and promises to make him swallow his words about his sister. Now, the fight marks the beginning of his true transformation. Choi taunts the MC, saying he learned to fight on YouTube. Before he finishes the sentence, Johnson hits him again in the nose. Surprised and furious, Choi charges, but the protagonist, focused, dominates him with a flurry of punches. Johnson wins the fight and completes the mission, leaving everyone shocked. Yakuza pulls him away, and they flee to a small house, anticipating Choi's friend's revenge. While they talk, Johnson receives a notification from the system, informing him that his boxing skill has risen to 97 out of 100. He tries to reveal new cards, but nothing happens. Soon, Beck appears worried, asking him to leave before things get worse. However, they are surprised by the return of Choi and his goons, who mock the two. At that moment, Gu Ha-jun, the most feared student in the school, appears. Jun asks who Choi Chang-dong is, and Choi gives himself away. Upon learning that the chubby guy attacked Johnson, Ha-jun confronts him and asks the protagonist to prove his strength. Our boy tries to back down but is pressured. Fearful, he looks at his cards and realizes he can use a special ability that heals his fatigue. Now faced with Ha-jun, Johnson must decide between fighting or getting beaten up again. While Ha-jun keeps insisting that Johnson show him his boxing skill, the poor Yakuza has already lost hope. And since he has no other choice, the protagonist throws a punch at Ha-jun, and surprisingly, the guy easily dodges. Then Gu makes a face like he's playing in the playground. Our protagonist starts to go into shock, because let's be honest, Ha-jun was very fast. Next, Johnson makes several other attempts to hit Ha-jun, but he can't land a hit. Then, to Johnson's surprise, Ha-jun decides to show his agility by hitting him with a punch. What a shame. Mercy. And he's out. 2 hours later, Kim wakes up all disoriented after some time, because that one punch Ha-jun threw put him to sleep like a baby. And when Johnson looks ahead, Gu-ha is there staring at him. The protagonist immediately gets into a position to take a beating mixed with a Chavez panic attack. However, unusually, Ha-jun tells Johnson to follow them, that they are going to smoke a cigarette. Kim is surprised and doesn't understand anything. Our protagonist was sleeping on the floor. It's really hard to understand much. And now outside, Johnson is among the delinquents. Then the guy points the cigarette at him and tells him to smoke. Funny how no one asks anything here. They just command. Then, the protagonist ends up saying that he doesn't smoke. But in his head, a conspiracy theory is rolling, thinking that the guys only took him to that place because they couldn't beat him inside. Then Ha-jun just asks his name, which is Johnson obviously, and apologizes for earlier. He says he retaliated and hit out of instinct because the protagonist seems to have talent. So everything Gu-ha says impresses Johnson. Back at Johnson's house, he comments that the missions so far have only been tutorials, and he's getting gold, silver, and bronze cards. Then Johnson wonders, are there stronger missions and stronger cards too? Imagine the abilities that would give cards superior to gold. It must be very overpowered. The next day at school, Johnson and his friend Yakuza appear, scared, thinking the guys would come looking for them. And out of nowhere, someone calls for Johnson. Unusually, the chubby guy appears saying he looked for him everywhere, and the protagonist quickly gets up with his guard up to throw punches at Choi. However, Choi just informs Johnson to go where Ha-jun is. It seems the chubby guy has become a messenger now. Apparently this was the result after getting beaten by our protagonist. Well folks, seeing the school leader doesn't seem like a good idea, but if he runs away now, it's best he doesn't show up at school again. So Johnson gathers his courage and goes over there. And there is Ha-jun with a bunch of people, as always, smoking a cigarette, which causes cancer. The guy tells Johnson to sit down while the girls are whispering, until someone calls for him. To our boy's surprise, it's the possible future girlfriend of the protagonist, worried about him again. And someone asks the protagonist to sing a song since they are at karaoke. So Johnson decides to use that high-tone card and starts to sing. And the people start to be impressed with the boy's talent. And I start to feel second-hand embarrassment. Even Ha-jun was impressed. The girls start to compliment Johnson, and the guys also begin to ask if he is friends with Ha-jun. And Ha-jun himself replies that yes, and says his name for everyone to hear. Then, Johnson feels happy believing he won't be beaten up that day, looks at Guha, and thinks he isn't as bad as they say. And for the first time, the next day, the protagonist wants to go to school. Johnson's life began to change, all thanks to the missions. But why do I feel like many problems are going to appear soon? Am I the only one feeling this? And speaking of problems, Ha-jun appears out of nowhere asking if he is going to school. Then the protagonist gets all happy because the guy invited him to go along. And it was at that moment that the main mission began. Yes, the tutorial missions are over. Now it's for real, folks. And by completing this mission they gave him now, he will be rewarded with a platinum card. And it was when Ha-jun called him to leave that the mission appeared. The mission to fight against Gu Ha-jun himself and win. The guy is the leader of the Gangkook CO prep school, and the protagonist only has 3 days to complete it. That's right, folks. Now it's going to be harder. And besides the main one, the system activated a secondary mission for him. A mission where he can obtain more cards from now on. But for that, you all will have to like the video. Otherwise the system won't give cards to anyone here. As for Johnson beating up Ha-jun, he could ask to train with the guy, and then he could go in pretending and knock out Guha. Although, with the reflexes Ha-jun has, I think it's practically impossible. So the protagonist starts to freak out, not knowing what to do. While the guy notices and asks if Johnson wants to say something to him. The result of this was the protagonist in shock, not knowing whether to eat or think about life. Although, he could easily do both. Even his friend seems a bit tired. Obviously, that's because Ha-jun is also at the table. Then the Yakuza asks Johnson why the guy is there. And it's obvious it's because the protagonist is his friend. And the worst part is that Ha-jun is being very polite. Saying he will leave first. It doesn't even seem like he will want to beat up Johnson later. Then, out of nowhere, the protagonist says that this is easy. The Yakuza asks if he is easy, or what the protagonist wants to do with him. Then Johnson tells him to shut up. But what the protagonist thought was that he could simply give up on the mission, and continue being great friends with Ha-jun, being protected forever. And when he arrives greeting Guha, he sees the guy smashing the chubby one on the pavement. While Choi is getting beaten up and apologizing at the same time, Ha-jun seems indifferent. The poor protagonist can't believe what he sees. Who has to come and rub this in his face for him to understand is his maybe future girlfriend, Baekcha-erin. The girl who can barely cross her arms. Look at that. And she says that the guy is being beaten up because he hasn't paid them lately. Kim knows this well, since he is one of the guys who pays, or used to pay the most. And all that money goes straight into Ha-jun's pocket. So she warns Johnson, saying that since the guy has been nice to him lately, it's good for him to know what kind of person Ha-jun is. And when the protagonist looks ahead, there is the smiling guy asking if he has been there for a while. By the guy's happiness, it doesn't even seem like he is beating someone up. The protagonist says he arrived at that moment and has something to ask him. Then Johnson asks Ha-jun why the guy is so nice to him. Surprised, the guy asks what the boy is talking about. Then Ha-jun says, it's because Johnson is very good at boxing. Then Gu says that before meeting the protagonist, everyone was like insects to him. No one had strength for anything. At that moment, that thought returns to Johnson's mind. If he just gives up on the mission and goes back to being the same as before, Ha-jun won't want to hang out with him anymore. And he will want to beat him up just like the others do. Then Guha wants to know why he is so curious, shaking him like a doll at the post, saying that he can tell what is happening. He can indeed believe it. Tell him you want to smash him in the face to see what happens. But thinking it over, the guy might actually like it. If you tell him you want to throw punches with him, he's probably going to enjoy that. And since the protagonist has no choice, all he can do is train to try to surpass Ha-jun. But obviously that won't be easy. The guy is practically the Mike Tyson of life. So all that's left for the protagonist is to play his cards and hope the guy trips and breaks his neck on his own. Because going toe-to-toe with him is going to be really tough. And other than that, everything's fine. So while Johnson is resting, this group shows up asking him for money to pay for their fare. And when the protagonist says he doesn't have money even to buy a better tank top, that's when the guys ask if he still doesn't get the situation, saying they're going to tear him apart. So the protagonist repeats that he doesn't have money. And the guy insists that he will beat him up. So there you go. You messed up. You got hit, buddy. Quickly, the guy brings his hand to his nose and says, "So you're the type that hits first." Of course, they came threatening the guy. He's got to get punched in the nose. And with that one punch the protagonist threw, he managed to evolve the mastery of the jab that was missing. Now that it's at the skill limit, it leveled up to rank E. And the protagonist feels it right away and is very happy. Then the guy tries to catch him off guard and receives another punch in the nose to wake him up. Apparently, Johnson is faster and stronger now. And even with the guy semi-knocked out, he hits him again to make sure his nose will be nice and swollen later. Furious, the guy tells his henchman to finish him off. Obeying the leader's orders, the guys head towards Johnson. But it was at that moment that the system created a side mission. The mission to fight 5 at the same time and win. These missions are getting easier and easier, huh? There's even a secret requirement that we don't know what it is. Because it's secret, right? And the system even lets him give up on the side missions. So when he thinks about giving up, the guys are already heading his way to smash him. Then, out of nowhere, he does this thing here, which I didn't understand, and calls everyone for a fight. Why did he do that with the tank top? It's giving me secondhand embarrassment from this protagonist. Is it just here? The protagonist is an idiot, but at least he's getting strong. That's what matters. And from what we can tell, he only gains points for this card by hitting the guys and not training alone. Kim even used the high-pitched card to say he isn't afraid of them, even while crying. Now that's courage. The guys watch him with psychopathic expressions, asking if he trains boxing, and suddenly, they charge at him. They seem a bit disturbed, too. The protagonist, wearing his feminine-style X-shaped tank top, throws a punch at the guy without hesitation. The man falls to the ground, eyes wide open. I don't even know where I am. The protagonist even wonders if he finished the guy off, but it seems he was just knocked out. Well, at least now there are only 4 left. After several attempts from the others to revive the guy, the protagonist finally understands that a punch to the chin leads to a knockout. Now he learned. One of them shouts to capture the protagonist while the others start to prepare. And here they come. Then the protagonist also charges forward, of course. Obviously, he wouldn't just stand there. If they surround him, it's almost certain to be his end. But it seems they finally caught up to Johnson. However, our protagonist apparently is out of strength. It's the others who are smoking, but he's the one who is out of breath. They keep saying he's tired, that he has no chance, but the protagonist suddenly pulls out the famous Dragon Ball seed. Those who are old school will understand. Then Johnson swallows it without even a glass of water, nothing. This is the famous recovery seed. It was that silver card he kept next to the high-pitched one. Finally, it was useful. Next, the first of the unsuspecting ones charges at Johnson. Then, the protagonist delivers a powerful jab to the guy, dodges forward, and lands 5 more jabs. The opponent is left confused, wondering, but wasn't this guy tired? Now it's no use complaining idiot, especially since the second one has already been knocked out and defeated. But that tank top of his still looks strange, we have to admit. I'm still trying to understand why he did that to his own clothes. And honestly, I'm even afraid there might be a logical explanation coming. Like, I twisted the tank top to prevent it from falling. Oh sure, now that 2 of the 5 idiots have been defeated, they start to worry. Doesn't it seem a bit late for that, guys? Suddenly the protagonist charges at them, shouting. He hits the chin of the first, then the second, and finishes with a blow to the chin of the third. It's always to the chin. Well, he defeated all 5 at once. Our protagonist is relentless. And, amidst all this, that secret objective was achieved. He defeated 5 guys without being hit. Even the system congratulates him for that, and it's not even his birthday. Look how impressive. And upon completing the secret objective, he will earn an additional gold card. 2 more cards in a side mission. At this rate, the protagonist will get strong quickly. There's no other way. Even he understands that he's lucky. That's right. The fact that the system appears to him already makes him a lucky guy, my friend. And off he goes, with his little X tank top requesting the card reveal. As always, his expression leaves us extremely curious. It's hard to tell if the card is excellent or a complete fraud. The protagonist always makes these expressions that confuse us. The next day, at school, there's little time left to finish his mission of defeating Ha-jun. So, Johnson becomes pensive. In fact, he's completely nervous. Currently, he has 4 cards. High-pitched, recovery seed, and 2 more that we still don't know what they are. They keep building suspense about it. But is that enough to face the monster? Now, he has no choice. If he fails, he'll go back to being the loser who got beaten by everyone. Suddenly, the Yakuza asks if he wants to kiss him. This Yakuza is crazy. He said that because the protagonist was staring at him. Kim even laughs at that moment. Because the Yakuza is his true friend. He's the one who's been by his side until now. So, Johnson thanks the Yakuza for helping him up to that point. And the Yakuza looks completely confused, utterly surprised. This gives me the impression that the Yakuza is hiding something and is the true leader of the school. But then, the head of the school arrives. Ha-jun appears inviting the protagonist to the cafeteria with that expression on his face. Is it an invitation or a threat? The protagonist immediately stands up as he's no fool. Suddenly, 2 students appear and one of them is holding an ice cream. Look, imagine the scene. The guy throws the ice cream at Ha-jun. He starts to apologize right away. But it seems it's already too late. The protagonist and Baekchaeran realize that the situation is about to get complicated. And the Yakuza is ready to close the coffin. This will be the most expensive ice cream the guy will ever pay for in his life. While Ha-jun holds the guy to hit him, he invites the protagonist again to go to the cafeteria. However, the protagonist asks him to stop. Let the guy go or we're going to fight. And look at that, the protagonist finally found some courage. Or he went crazy. That's an option too. Ha-jun calls him by name and asks if he knows what he's doing. Then the protagonist responds with a, "Of course I do, you idiot. Enough talk. Let's settle this in a fight, brother. Now I understand whose coffin the Yakuza is going to close." Just kidding, folks. Maybe with this gold card, the protagonist can headbutt Ha-jun's hand. He could have simply invited the guy for a friendly spar. He could, but since he decided this way, let's see how it goes. Looking on the bright side of the story, at least the protagonist isn't wearing the X tank top now. It's true. Kim challenged the school leader out of nowhere. When he realizes, Ha-jun's hand is already coming towards him. I thought he was done for. But it was just to say that he's a loyal guy, asking if Johnson is mad because he's messing with his crew. The protagonist starts to get confused while Ha-jun asks him to stop being angry, and he says friends shouldn't fight each other. So, tell that to Tokyo Revengers. There. It's punch the friend, punch the friend's friend, punch the friend's mom. No, wait. The friend's mom. No. And man, look at the size of Hajun's hand. He grabs Johnson's whole head. And out of nowhere, the guy grabs the protagonist and takes him to eat something. Already at break time, the famous whispers are circulating, known as gossip. One of the girls comments to another that a weird guy picked a fight with Hajun, but if only he had succeeded. However, no one expected Hajun to apologize. They expected Hajun to scalp the protagonist. That's why the protagonist is sad. Yes, he's sad for not being able to start a fight. The Yakuza tries to console him, but the mission is about to expire. It's hard for the protagonist not to feel sad. It's like Samson is about to lose his hair, you know? And the Yakuza asks why he's like this. The protagonist says it's because of Hajun. And out of nowhere, someone calls him. Of course, it's the brunette who can't stay away from our protagonist. She arrives asking if he's trying to pick a fight with Hajun, and he says he doesn't know. Now, it's his turn to ask her. He quickly asks why she's hanging out with Hajun, since she helped him with Choi Chandon, told him about Hajun, and helped him other times. And thinking about it, she doesn't intimidate the weaker ones. In short, she must be a good person, and we agree that she really is. Her answer is that it's comfortable to hang out with the guys, and the protagonist says it is for him too. Then, she interrupts him, saying that he shouldn't get carried away, as she's giving him a chance. And when he realizes, the protagonist is already drinking her juice. And out of nowhere, someone calls the protagonist, all desperate. Something big is happening. This big something is a gang from Hajun, asking why the Yakuza wants to talk to Hajun. They claim that Hajun wouldn't want to talk to someone like him. The guy was about to charge at the Yakuza, until Hajun arrives, and tells everyone to get out of the way. He asks why the Yakuza called him. And very irritated, he says not to bother Johnson anymore, because his friend is acting weird today, because of him. The Yakuza reinforces, telling Hajun that what he's doing is intimidation. Then Hajun punches the Yakuza in the face, making even the goons scared of him. Then Hajun says that Johnson and he are friends, and he also hates people like the Yakuza, stating that he doesn't even look like a real person. Wow, he went hard. He says there are rankings in this world, and the Yakuza is preventing Johnson from climbing that ranking. He makes Johnson's ranking decrease. Meanwhile, the Yakuza says that if he thinks that way about Johnson, then Johnson doesn't consider him a friend. And, out of nowhere, Johnson appears and punches Hajun in the jaw, leaving even the goons in shock. And even Hajun didn't understand that. The protagonist arrives, asking the Yakuza if he knows that, if it weren't for him, he wouldn't have endured this unbearable school life. Of course, the rumors are long gone. They passed by shouting in every classroom that the fight was happening outside. And quickly, a crowd forms to watch. But they comment that this won't be a fight, but rather a massacre. Everyone is there to see the fight. The Yakuza, the protagonist's brunette, me, you all. And Hajun asks if Johnson really wants to fight. After all, until then, he thought Johnson was his friend. The protagonist says he will make everything clear from that moment on. The only friend he has is the Yakuza. And he even threw in a son of a b** at the end, just to make it clear that he was angry. And he is confident that he will defeat Hajun, because his gold card gives him extra strength for just 5 seconds. So, he claims he will beat the guy in 5 seconds. Then you were foolish. You should have used that card on the first punch you threw, hitting him until you win. That's how you would win. Now you've lost your chance, gave the lion an opportunity. Now you'll have to endure the blows.